And we are live, Mr. Chairman.
All right, good morning. My name's Todd Helwig. I am Chair of the White Cliffs Commission. This open meeting is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, the town of Northborough has been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. As such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. And for this meeting, we are not taking input from the public. I believe that is it.
Mr. Chairman, you just want to confirm all the members are in attendance and can hear us?
Yes, I do. Let's see. Norm?
Here.
Diane?
Here.
Let's see. Oh, what am I missing? I'm
Julie.
blanking. I don't have my list in front of me. What was that?
Julianne, you're missing.
Julianne, I'm missing.
And Tom Reardon.
That's what happens when you don't come prepared on time. Tom, are you there?
Don't believe Tom is connected.
All right, so that means we have Norm, Diane, Julianne, and myself. All right. Let's do the minutes. So let's starting with September 3rd. Did anybody have any comments on the minutes?
Yes, I would like something added, please.
What is it?
If you could please add that at the meeting, I requested coordinating a visit into the building at a time when contractors or architects were on site. Town Administrator John Cordair stated that no one but municipal employees or contractors are allowed in for insurance purposes.
I don't have any problem with adding that. That's my recollection.
Thank you.
That was on the 3rd?
That was on the 3rd, right?
That was on the 3rd.
Okay, well, we'll go on to the next set of minutes.
Well, was the minutes for the 22nd circulated? I was trying to see if there was an email that said
Yeah,
that weren't being done
I had
yet.
sent an email out last night. We're going to have to, those are in progress. We're going to have to take those up at your next meeting. So for today, all you have are the approval of minutes from your September 3rd meeting, which were postponed from your last meeting.
All right, then, do I have a motion to approve the minutes as they have been amended?
So moved.
All right,
Second.
let's go down the list here. Norm,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Julianne,
Yes.
and I am yes. Minutes approved. Next item. All right.
Mr. Chairman, could I have a question for you or a request?
Absolutely, Norm.
All right. Considering this, we just started the Zoom meetings with White Cliffs, and they're all been recorded and other people can start watching them now. I wanted to give a little update for the new audience to know where we are, where we were, and how we got where we are. Is that acceptable? Take about 3
Absolutely.
minutes?
Please proceed.
All right, let me pull it up so I can read it properly. All right. So the way I'm looking at it here is I found that we had 4 key management decisions over the last few years, and I just want to highlight them. First, it was decided that in addition to requesting funding for the purchase of the property, the request should also include funding to secure the building, have it thoroughly evaluated, and pay for monthly expenses like insurance. That funding request was finally authorized at the April 2016 town meeting. So the key there was the additional funding for future work regarding the property. The second, excuse me, the second one that I found was in July of 2016, the town paid for an environmental site assessment of the property. This evaluation identified the presence of an old oil tank beneath the parking lot that started to leak. The town made the decision that the property would not be purchased until the tank and any contaminated soil were removed. Once this was confirmed and the site was cleaned, then the property was purchased in September 2017. The third big decision that was made, it was clear that the first order of business was to re-roof the mansion. The current roof was reaching its service life and several leaks were observed. The decision was to apply for an emergency waiver from the Massachusetts Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance. This allowed the town to seek out local vendors. A Northborough-based roofer was found who roofed the building at a fraction of the cost of earlier quotes. Finally, I think our critical decision recently was the hiring of the architectural firm DBVW. This company has been a great asset. They are a dedicated team that are fascinated with the architecture of White Cliffs and take their enthusiasm into the evaluation of the building. Their contract contains 3 main tasks. So this is the contract with the DBVW. The first task is how to work with us to determine how best to secure the building. This is to secure it from weather, critters, and any intruders. The second task was to evaluate the building thoroughly. This included things such as structural stability, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, preparing digitized drawings of the building's floor plan, documenting the building modifications over time, and identifying its character-defining architectural features. The third task was really an overview, an initial reuse considerations for the property. Their evaluation is really, it's very useful, but it's a cursory overview to look at the general financial considerations for several reuse options. And that's where we are today. We're working with DBVW to finalize their final report for their findings. That pretty much brings us up to current day. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the time to give an overview of the project. Thanks.
Sure. Any other discussion of that? Hearing none.
Oh, I do.
All right.
I was wondering, Norm, since it appears that that's written down, could that be added verbatim to the minutes? Some people choose to just read minutes as opposed to watching the YouTube video. So I think that's a great summary, and I think it would be valuable to add as is to the minutes.
I have no problem with that.
Okay,
No,
great.
certainly fine.
You'll certainly make my admin happy.
So I'll send it off to Linda.
Yeah, just send it to Linda and we'll incorporate. Again, Norm, through the chair, if I may, I think it was very helpful and important as people sort of tune into projects like this at different points. And there isn't always a full appreciation for the amount of work and process that's been filed to get us to where we are to date. So I think that was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The next item would be the option 4 proposal from the architects. John, you want to talk about that?
Sure. At your last meeting, we went through the detailed work of Eric Bush. He was the sub-consultant for our architect, and he's the one that did the feasibility pro formas for the various reuse options. And just to remind folks, the 3 options that this committee chose in working with DBVW were an event space with and without an addition, a municipal use, and a residential use. And the residential included potentially the construction of additional buildings, I believe up to 20 units, in addition to rehabbing the mansion, which would include 2 apartments. So those were the 3 options. They provided us with the pro forma, and again, this is very conceptual at this level. It's more of a building massing in terms of what would fit on the site, how it might look. And then some basic information in terms of budget based on cost per square foot for the types of renovation on the historic part of the building as well as new construction. So all that information was compiled. It was in the draft report that we discussed, but I think as all of us were disappointed when we saw those numbers, that there was very significant gaps ranging from 10 to $14 million in terms of the economic viability of those options in terms of private sector potential reuse. That these were things that were going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to finance with subsidy from the community. I think in general, the committee recognized that in order for this project to move forward to the extent possible, we need to find a economically viable reuse. Now, the community is going to subsidize this project no matter what. What we believe conceptually we were hoping is that the town purchased the building, and we've done some basic renovation of the building envelope. The roof, we fixed the back dormer, we preserved the historical artifacts that were removed by the previous owner. So we've done all that basic work. And now the question is, moving forward with a potential reuse, we've narrowed it down to three very expensive reuses. I don't think anybody felt comfortable that we would be looking at a subsidy in excess of $10 million to make this project viable. And again, those numbers were sobering. And so we had a discussion with the architect amongst the committee at the last meeting and requested them to give us another option. And so all the previous options that we had looked at included or anticipated getting the historic core structure back to its former historic glory, which is a very expensive proposition. And so we asked the architect, given that the three options that we've focused on for reuse appear to be potentially out of reach financially, we asked them to come back with a fourth option, which would really just try to preserve the building as it is. Not necessarily stripping things back to the old brownstone, uncovering the porch, removing additions that are blocking some of the original historic features. And so to if the town were to basically handle the acquisition costs and some of the preservation work that we've done so far, what would it take to have somebody come in and try to preserve the building and the streetscape and some of the interior woodwork and the key things, but not necessarily remove the old additions, or if the old additions were removed, to put something back that allowed the building to be used for potentially one of the options that we are focused on. And so I believe Martha Werenthal termed that preservation light. And so really it was focused on, or it's intended to focus on, preserving that streetscape and preserving some of the key architectural features on the inside of the building, but again, not going back and restoring the building to its original glory. So what I distribute by email in advance of the meeting was their proposal for evaluation of reuse option 4. And I'll just read the functions just for the folks at home and for the record. So the proposal is basically extending their existing contract because we've concluded the work that we contracted with BBVW to complete. And we have the draft report, and at a subsequent meeting, they will come in and do a full presentation of their report, kind of a more in-depth review of Norm's synopsis at the beginning of the meeting. But so there's two things here. So the description of option 4 is as follows. It contains 7 things. Number 1, preserve the exterior envelope without fully restoring the original configuration. 2, repair and limited preservation of the interior. 3, consider retention and repair of some additions. 4, include full mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection systems to upgrade the building. 5, evaluate inclusion of accessibility improvements. 6, there's no specific use will be identified. 7, no site improvements beyond utility connections will be included. So again, this is trying to preserve the building more or less as it exists now, and try to see what that would cost. Which brings us to the second part, which is the project scope. And there are 5 components there. 1, add an option to the final report. So we already have the draft report. I think it's important that this option be worked into that final report. So I'll have to rewrite portions and add this into the report that we've already taken a draft copy of. Number 2, provide written description without drawings of what option 4 would include with respect to the building. Number 3, provide additional market feasibility analysis for option 4. That's going to be a key component for us to try to determine if it's something that is viable. Number 4, attend one meeting with the White Cliffs Committee. They're saying in here that they've already completed that at their last meeting. I think it's important to note that DBVW and their consultants have completed the scope for what we've paid them for. So any additional work needs to be compensated. 5, deliver the revised final report, including this new option 4. So that's the concept of what option 4 is, the deliverables that DBVW has outlined in their contract. And for these additional services, their fee is proposed at $5,800 plus a $400 allowance for reimbursable expenses. I'll note that they were nice enough to maintain their current rate schedule, which has gone up because the project has continued for over a year. And so naturally expenses and wages increase, but they agreed to maintain their current wage table for our project. So, there are some limitations and exclusions. They're not going to identify remediation of hazardous materials that we haven't already done. They're not looking at additional site visits. It's really just them taking all the information that they have and already and saying, okay, so what's the minimum we would need to do to try to preserve the building and put it back in play where a private sector individual might be willing to come in and potentially acquire the place or work with the town for a long-term lease and make some of these upgrades so that we have a viable option. Again, the big component, if you read the full report, obviously we were looking at as much historic restoration work as we could as part of the big project. We got those numbers. Those numbers are very, very high. And so now the committee requested this proposal, and the goal of this proposal is to see what can we do at a more reasonable price point to try to preserve the building without going back and restoring it again to its former glory. So that's what you have before you today. What I would be looking for from the committee are any comments regarding this and a vote to execute this additional scope of services with DBVW. And I believe they have included in here to get this work done and a revised draft final report back to us in November. That's what I have, Mr. Chairman.
So what is in section A4, include full mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection systems to upgrade the building? What does that mean?
Well, in order to reopen this building, even if you're not rehabbing it, or even if you're not doing a full historic restoration, certain things by code are going to be required. You're going to need a fire alarm, a new fire suppression system. You're going to need some mechanical plumbing work. So what they're looking at doing there is saying, if you're not going to do a full rehab or go with one of these very expansive approaches, if you're just trying to get the building up to code to potentially reopen it, what would that cost?
So they're just going to give us the cost and a roadmap to doing that.
Yes.
Okay. I saw something in here about ADA, so we are not doing anything about ADA as part of this?
I think they're going to evaluate the inclusion of accessibility improvements. So yes, they are going to look.
Oh,
at
there
that.
it is. Yep, I
Yeah,
thought I
they
saw.
may, again, more than likely, the big expense there is an elevator, if you're going to put an elevator in the facility.
All right, two more thoughts from me. In subsection B, number 3, provide additional market feasibility analysis for option 4. What does that mean? That's just going to be a number, right?
I think it's going to look similar to what you received for your other options. So try to match up what it would take to put, how much money would need to be put into the building with this preservation and code compliance option. And then what, what would it look like in terms of the finance piece of it? Again, it's going to be limited because you're not really identifying a specific use.
That was my question, right? Because they're going to come up with a number to get it to this base state, but they're not going to apply the number to the 3 categories we previously talked about.
No.
Okay.
No,
That's
basically,
that's what I thought.
Yeah. I mean, basically they're coming in, they're going to say, listen, what would it take to try to preserve the building and get it back on the market, potentially for a use? And what would be the minimum if somebody weren't going to come in and restore the building, tear off the additions, open the porches back up, put the balconies back on, get it back to its original brownstone, all those things. It will clearly limit historic preservation funding, whatever limited funding that might be available, that kind of restoration. And we know that going in, but the numbers are just so big that, again, we're hopeful that we'll find this lighter option or minimum work that would need to be done to potentially match up with a developer or somebody interested in doing something with this building. One of the things that is not answered here, and this is a question, as we get this information, we're going to need to ponder is, once we have this information, again, what do we do with it? If the other 3 options we've identified are not viable due to the costs, then, and this is the option that we are going to potentially pursue, well, we need to figure out how do we actually do that? Do we hire a broker? Do you hire a marketing firm? So that's another discussion that would need to take place. Of once you get this, how do you try to put this option potentially in play?
So my last question, and then I'll open it up. This is pretty simple. So this is on item B4. So it says attend 1 additional meeting already completed. They're coming back one more time, right?
They're coming back one more time under their original scope to do a full presentation. Basically what that is they weren't coming back to this meeting. So they attended our last meeting to have this discussion with us already.
Yeah.
And so they didn't want to have to come back to this meeting again. Their contract is expended, and I've worked with a lot of architects over the years on a number of public building projects. I will say that they have been very liberal with us in terms of their time. They clearly are beyond the scope of service in the contract that we've paid them for. So I think they're just kind of making that point that they came back to the last meeting, go over the draft. I had this discussion. And so the next thing is going to be a presentation from them on the full revised report, including option 4.
Okay. I just want to make sure they were coming back one more time. And the last comment for me is I'm okay with the number, the 5,800. So
in my experience, I'd say that's a very reasonable fee proposal, particularly particularly given the fact that we know they've done work well beyond their contract. I think as far as the architectural firm, just for the record, we chose the right firm. They've done an exceptional job for us. Don't kill the messenger. It's not their fault. The numbers are what they are. And, but we do need to, if we want additional work out of them to help us refine this further, then we'll need to compensate them. And we do have the funding in the appropriate article to accommodate this.
Okay. Other committee members?
My questions were all answered, Todd. Thank you.
So I just had a couple comments. I agree that the number is fine and that they've done an exceptional job, you know, going above and beyond on their original scope. I read the market feasibility as, I know we've established 3 options, but I think that there will be some light discussion about what is likely if you were to do preservation light. So I don't think it's just that they're going to give us a number. I think they're going to contextualize it within the market as they have previously. And I think that will support, you know, additional discussion in the meeting with them about what we could think about if the building were preserved at that level.
I think, and through the chair, if I may, I think as we went through all these numbers and we were kind of looking at what is the most viable option, more than likely we'll be looking at some sort of hospitality event space, which is what it was used for originally. The municipal reuse of a building was I think it was 31 million. That number is nothing that I can support from the town budget. I mean, we certainly can have that discussion, but I think there are much more viable options for the town hall space for municipal use of it. And then the residential, you know, we had a long discussion at the last meeting about that. But I think you'll see inserting this information into kind of where we are. We only have a couple of you know, focused reuse options that this would kind of work with, but so there'll be some discussion there, I would assume.
Okay, Julianne?
So it sounds like a lot of where this is leading us is that we will seriously look at selling the building. Does that have to go before town meeting?
No, we're not making any decisions or about selling the building. You know, there are a number of options. Like I said, if one of the options potentially would be if the town, you know, the town paid to acquire the facility and has done some modest upgrades to preserve the building envelope. If that subsidy in and of itself was enough to entice somebody to come in, if they didn't have to restore the building at great expense to its former glory, but could kind of fix up what's there, get to code compliance, either rehab the additions or have you know, some other similar addition at a reasonable cost point to open the building back up for use. The town could potentially get into a long-term lease agreement with them for a nominal fee. And within that option, you know, I would argue we would try to get some, you know, a few days a year, you know, use at least. If it is an event center, that would be something that you can negotiate into for consideration. But I think you're looking at something very similar to, you know, when the place was originally on the market, of trying to get it to a price point where it's worthwhile for someone to come in, do the code compliance and the structural work that needs to be done to get the building back open and used. So no, it doesn't necessarily mean selling the building. I don't think we're there yet. This information will hopefully get us another option to pursue, partnering with potentially, you know, private sector entities to be interested in maybe coming in and rehabbing the building.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, you know, again, we want to, I think, I don't want to speak for the committee, but I think we want to pursue every option that we can to certainly preserve the streetscape and the character that people have come to think of White Cliffs. I know as preservationists, and, you know, we looked at, you know, this getting it back again, I keep saying, to its former glory. But if the options are, you don't have anything that is economically viable, then preserving that streetscape and preserving as much of the internal historic part of the building and the artifacts as we can, and maybe not being as picky about, the additions have to come off and the historic part has to be restored. That would be great if money was no object, but I think we're going to try to hit that sweet spot where if we can find a partner that's willing to come in, and the town is going to have to subsidize this project one way or another. I think if the subsidy could be held to the acquisition costs through the Community Preservation Act, which is why the Community Preservation Act exists, then if we can find a partner or a series of partners and put something together where somebody to come in again and be able to rehab the building, get it up to code compliance, fix the issues that remain that need attention, and potentially have it back for a use. The other thing that the town has at its disposal as well, and I don't want to jump the gun with this discussion, but through the Economic Development Incentive Program that we participate in, we could engage them in a tax increment financing agreement, which basically would allow that entity to pay a reduced tax bill to help subsidize the project. So you'd be foregoing revenue, but not necessarily having to come up with revenue. And basically, as long as we own it right now, where nobody's paying taxes on it as it is. But if you look at all the models that were run that we looked at, they weren't carrying any money in there for taxes. So the assumption was that the town is, in order to make it viable and attractive, is going to have to probably provide some sort of tax forgiveness or a TIF, tax increment financing agreement to forgo taxes on the property. I seem to remember, the place paid somewhere around $33,000 a year in that neighborhood in taxes. So, but again, nobody's paying taxes on it now. We own it, and again, it would just be one more thing that we can bring to bear to incentivize someone to come in and put money into what would otherwise be a prohibitively costly investment. As you know, the prior owner tried to market it as it is to preserve the building and was unsuccessful. So again, the town has already purchased it. We have a couple more things that we could do, depending on the amount of preservation that gets done. We can look at any available grants, things of that nature. There is potential, and again, I'm not saying that this is what we would do at this stage because it's very early, but there is potential for additional community preservation funds if we can get closer to something that is financially viable on its own. So I think that's the goal.
Okay, anything else from anyone?
I'm good.
All right, then I guess we need a motion to approve the proposal for option 4.
So moved.
Second.
I'll second.
All right. All right, let's go through. Norm,
I approve.
Diane,
I approve.
Julianne,
I approve.
and I approve as well. So the motion passes, and that is all set.
So through the chair, I will execute this as soon as our meeting is over, get it back to DBVW and their consultants so they can begin the work. I'll touch base with them regarding how long in terms of a meeting to schedule, rather than us pick a meeting and they're not ready. Because I also want to have a little discussion with them about what that meeting will be. Will it only be to discuss this option 4, or are they going to do a full-blown presentation on their report, including option 4? So we'll hold the schedule that date, and I'll get some dates from the architect and get them back to the committee. If that
Okay.
makes sense.
So I just kind of thinking out another couple steps. So the next meeting would be this sort of discussion we would have with the architect on the full report. And then we'd probably have the next step after that would be sort of what to do next, right? And so I'm thinking, is that going to be like a discussion as to whether we bring in brokers and discuss an RFP process as to what to do, or are you going to wait until town meeting? What are your thoughts?
I'm trying to gather some information. I'm working with DBBW. I've spoke to a couple of other folks to try to frame that process up for you a little bit. And certainly if anybody has any thoughts or information on that, I know I spoke with Diana just because of her experience as an architect working on projects like this. But I think we'd have to have, I want to try to frame up what that process might look like. And I think DBBW would be helpful in doing that for the committee. Because again, look, I've done successfully building projects, senior centers, libraries, school building projects. I got that down pat. This is a very unique project and we are in a very unique situation. So this isn't one where you just kind of, put a quick scope together and kind of know where you're going. The big thing is if we're going to have help in trying to market the place, these aren't traditional municipal services that you're procuring. So I need to do a little bit of homework on that to frame that up for a discussion.
That's kind of what I was thinking. I don't ever remember too many brokerage signs in front of municipal buildings in my.
And I'm not saying that's the way we're going to go, but I think we do need to. I need to frame this up in my mind because I'm not exactly clear after we get this information how best we should implement it. So I want to have a discussion with the architect and the financial analyst folks that they are working with about what their thoughts are, and then we're going to have to mesh what might be a logical approach with the procurement laws of the Commonwealth, which doesn't always follow logic and certainly aren't designed for this kind of a project. So we're going to have to kind of mesh these things together, find something that makes sense, but is also legal and compliant with the state procurement laws.
But that's go ahead.
I was just going to say, I will have some additional information regarding options for that process. I also wondered if it's worth having a discussion with DCAM Real Estate. I know they don't own the property, but they certainly are going to understand that process because they both, acquire and sell their property frequently.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things I'd be looking to do is get some guidance from our friends at the state, because we're not the only project like this, but there aren't a lot, and each historic project like this is sort of unique in and of itself. So there are some things that we can pull from experience from others. So that's going to take a little bit of time to kind of bring that together and start to frame it up so we can have an informed discussion. Otherwise, people will come up with, look, if this were a private sector, this is what I would do. We get that advice all the time. And then I have to tell folks, well, that might work for you as a private individual or in the private sector, but we have to comply with these onerous laws and that don't necessarily make sense in these types of unique situations. So we need to work through that process. But I welcome any input anybody has, certainly.
Anybody got anything else? Hearing none.
Oh, I was, this is a little bit off topic. Is that okay? This is another issue.
Sure.
So we talk a lot about the streetscape in the town. I think we can safely say that the town would like to maintain the visual appearance of, a stately old home. In the very near future, I am wondering about the possibility of removing the statues. They are looking a little sad. And I guess I'm making a motion that we consider doing that as one of our next steps.
Well, I mean, I guess I don't know that you necessarily need to make a motion, but I mean, if it's in we own the statute, so theoretically we can get rid of the statues if we want to. I guess the question is, where would the money come from to do it, and whether that's something we want to pay for from the war chest that we have remaining.
So I guess our first piece of information that we need is what is the cost to remove them, I guess.
Okay, if we certainly can do that. I think right now we're trying to work through, it's about prioritizing what
Right,
needs to be done. I've asked Scott to work with the carpenter that has secured the back dormer, which, by the way, looks terrific. I believe we've sent out some pictures. If not, we can send some pictures with it finished. We're getting some quotes for some. There's some significant building rot. Windowsills, windows are no longer secured in the sashes, and some work may need to be done depending on the timeline for what we're looking at here with option 4 and where that goes, that we may need to do to keep the building from deteriorating further. And we have very limited funds. And so frankly, if the statutes fall apart, I don't know that is of any consequence in terms of the historic part of the building, but if the windows keep falling out or water continues to get in through the rotted wood, I would think that would be the priority. So, again, we can spend money on a lot of things up there. I don't know, from my perspective, that removing the statues would be a priority. I think trying to keep replacing as much as we can, keeping further deterioration from the historic structure and keeping the water out. If we have limited funds, we might want to focus on that. So
I think that I agree, because I think this process will continue for some time, and we will have other problems with the architectural aspects of that building in the meantime.
Well, to explain a little bit about what John's describing, some of the outside windowsills in the turret are rotted to the point where water is going through the wood windowsill behind the wall and saturating the wood flooring. So those sills need to be either wrapped with flashing, removed and replaced to prevent that water infiltration. Some of the old window sashes, the actual little window pane, there is no glazing in it. They're blowing in to the building and just smashing on the floor. So those need to be removed and those windows secured.
I think the statues are an aesthetic issue, which from a priority standpoint of preserving the structure, I think would necessarily be a lower priority.
I completely understand where you're coming from, and I totally agree. But do we have any idea how much it would cost to remove those statues? And I'd like to step back a little bit and explain why I am thinking about this. I attended a Preservation Massachusetts lecture a while ago, actually about a year ago, and one of the projects that was talked about, some of the people on the committee who were involved said that when they painted the old building, they just put a fresh coat of paint on an old building. All of a sudden, people were had more interest in the project. And obviously, we're not going to paint the building; that it's too big of a and detailed of a structure. But I'm wondering if a small thing like removing the statues would improve the whole appearance. And my opinion is, since they're not looking real spiffy now, that it could improve how it looks. And I don't know, maybe Scott or John, you have an idea of what it would cost to remove it? Are we talking 1,000? Are we talking 20,000? What is your guess?
I don't have a guess. I don't know what's involved. Again, we've been just focusing on the most priority important things up there. So I wouldn't know. We can get a contractor to give an estimate, but again, if I have 5,000, 10,000, whatever we have, I think we just need to be very careful that we are spending it on preserving the building, because this process is going to take a while, and I don't know how long it's going to take. And again, otherwise, if we go back to town meeting and seek more funding, but at this point, we're focused on trying to preserve the building itself with the limited funds that we have. So
And
We can get a number, but again, we've got a lot on our plate right now. And, you know, if the committee feels that that's a priority, then we can do it. We can look at it, but, you know, again, we're trying to get quotes on preserving the actual building and working with those folks. And that's just a lot of time and effort in trying to go back and forth with folks, because like I always say, you know, it's if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want a glass of milk, that old children's story I'm fond of referring to. It's hard to pick a stopping place with a building like this because it needs a lot of work. And so we're trying to do triage and stopgap measures to keep the water out. We've done a lot of great stuff, but you know, the closer you look, we also still have the chimney, which we discussed at the last meeting. That's a very expensive project, and it is in rough shape. Again, if we have money, those are the things that I would recommend you spend your time and energy on.
I suspect you're going to put this under the same category, but what about like signage or something that at least says that it's ours, it was paid for by CPC funds, something to I think to Julianne's point about demonstrating something to the public that there's forward progress. You could also just say same answer, Todd. That would be.
No, I mean we can spend money on signage if you think that that's you know helpful. I mean we just we have a lot of heavy lifting, value added, very significant things that are on our plates for this for this process right now.
Well,
so,
and we could
could
talk about maybe CPC admin fund or something for that.
Yep. I mean we can put signage up if you would like.
Wasn't the CPC considering some signage for their projects anyway? Because that's one thing that's never been done. But if you go to other towns, there's always a signage in front when there's a CPA funded project. So I think the sign's a good idea. I think CPC should have them anyway. So that's my 2 cents on that. Getting my 2 cents on the statues. The statues were really never appropriate for the mansion, so they really have to go at some point. But to me, it's down the road a piece. Personally, I think if you put them up for auction, you'd be surprised how many people would probably want one of those in their backyard. So I would wait on the statues and put that on hold. That's my 2 cents.
All right. Diane, do you have strong views on this?
I think a sign might be good. I guess, I don't know if those statues are considered part of the historic
No, they're not.
sort of quality.
Not at
Then,
all.
I guess also, I think that's something that if we think that they're not part of that, there's no value from a preservation standpoint, then you may want to demolish the whole, ensemble of all of them, not just the statues themselves, but that's something I would say you do during the actual building project if there is one coming up.
All right. So what I'm hearing is there's consensus that the signs are detestable, but not necessarily worth spending our limited funds on right now.
No, you meant not the signs, you meant the statues.
Did I say signs? I meant statues. The signs may also be detestable once we see them. So, Julianne, are you okay for now?
Yes, of course. I can respectfully disagree, but also I would agree with Norm that I do recall a CPC meeting where someone talked about having attractive signage up about CPC, this is your tax dollar at work or something like that. So
we talk about it every year, every meeting for about the last 10 years. So I'm gonna bring it up specifically when we meet again relatively soon as something we need to consider and maybe pay for out of the admin budget, which is more flexible.
Great.
Okay.
Great. Okay.
All right. Anything else?
Nothing else on my end today.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Oh, 1 second. I don't have.
There's always somebody.
I'm sorry, cutting you off. I do want pictures of the dormer It's the new, we saw the dormer being constructed, but we didn't see it in the final step. So I'd like to see a picture of that, please.
Yeah, it came out terrific. And we'll shoot those out
Thank you.
to the meeting.
I'm done.
All right, motion to adjourn.
I'll make a
move-
motion to adjourn today's White Cliffs committee meeting.
Thank you, Norm. Second?
Second,
All right, Norm,
Agreed.
Diane,
Agreed.
Julianne,
yes.
I agree as well. We're adjourned.